We are talking Screamers, a 1979 movie directed by Sergio Martino, although on this release it's under the pseudonym Miller Drake. Now, Screamers has been known by many names, including its original Italian movie. It was also released as Island of the FISHMEN, Island of the Mutations, Something Waits in the Dark. So, you know, a whole bunch of names, as sometimes happens with these older movies. And the interesting thing with this particular cut that I have watched is that this is the American cut of the movie, which actually had some newly added footage, essentially, that was filmed for American audiences, that was kind of mainly at the beginning of the movie. So that's the version of the movie that I have watched, and it's essentially like a kind of little sub-story, if you like, at the beginning of the movie that kind of adds a little bit more kind of gore, a few kind of new characters and things like that, and then the rest of the movie is essentially the original version of the film. There's a couple of scenes, I believe, which are added as well. So, this has kind of been described as a kind of Island of Dr. Moreau meets the kind of creature from the Black Lagoon, and I can totally see where they are going with that. The story primarily focuses on a group of survivors of a shipwreck taking place in the 19th century. And we get a few survivors kind of wash up on this island, and they're killed off. Some of them are killed off through various means. The remaining survivors end up meeting a small colony of people, primarily a young woman played by Bach, and kind of an older guy who he appears to be like the proprietor of the island, and he kind of has under his control a few kind of natives and things. So there seems to be something going on. There may well be an active volcano. We obviously, hence the title, there is these kind of vicious humanoid fishmen that seem to be in the waters. There may well even be the idea that Atlantis may well be near to this island, and ultimately it's kind of like finding out what has happened. What is the kind of the origin of these fishmen? Are they descendants from the original people from Atlantis, or are they mutations caused by human genetic meddling? Well, you have to watch the movie and find out. So let's talk about what I think works in this movie. I am actually a bit of a sucker for aquatic kind of horror movies, so I quite enjoyed this one for a lot. It reminds me a lot, actually, in a way, of Humanoids from the Deep. And, you know, it's really nice in this kind of like this island kind of tropical kind of like setting, like an adventure, jungle adventure movie in some ways, and Martino actually did a few of these. Including like The Great Alligator, for example. So it has this kind of like swashbuckling kind of feel to it. Now, obviously, this is a late 70s movie. The effects are somewhat dated, but I still kind of liked them. In particular, kind of like the arms of these creatures, what we generally see the majority of, you know, these outstretched arms and things like that, and when they're looking. I actually quite like the effects for 1979 kind of practical effects. I know we had like Star Wars and stuff at that time, and you know, but we have to bear in mind this is a kind of a lower budget movie coming from Italy and stuff like that. They kind of remind me of the Sea Devils from kind of Doctor Who. I thought they were kind of quite fun, and you know, it's somewhat kind of cheesy 70s kind of sound effects, but again, I kind of quite like them. Barbara Bach, I think, is very alluring as our leading lady here. Obviously, sending the kind of the guys googly-eyed, as well as these kind of these sea creatures as well. And I think the one thing I did like about this movie as well, in regards to its kind of plot, is that it kind of gives you these different versions of maybe where these kind of fishmen has come from, really. It gives you a couple of alternatives in regards to their kind of origins, and there are, you know, there's evidence that there's obviously the city of Atlantis under the ocean, and the proprietor of this island who may well have just selfish desires towards it. There's other characters who may have more of a scientific interest. You know, so it adds a few layers to this movie. I think our main protagonist he's portrayed to be, you know, somewhat of a selfless, heroic, you know, very kind of like typical kind of like no nonsense kind of heroic character. And overall, it has an element of kind of fun to it. I especially liked, I would say, the first two acts of this movie. You don't see loads of these kind of fishmen, so to speak, in the first two acts. Some might accuse it of being a little slow, but that's somewhat typical of kind of 70s movies. But I still kind of quite like the mystery. I kind of quite like this. We don't know what this island is all about. And that, to me, was the most fun part of this movie. Which leads me into maybe what doesn't work. For me, I think the third act was the weakest. It's when all the kind of the explanations are given, and you know the plot kind of ends up kind of ramping up a little bit, going a little bit of a faster pace. But to me, it lost some of that kind of like that mystery allure that was in the kind of the first two acts, because you know ultimately people are kind of like have to kind of wrap up their storylines, and it just feels a little bit kind of messy. The conclusion feels a little bit kind of rushed, and I think people play into stereotypes more. Certainly in the third act, you know, we get a dastardly villain, you know, a square-jawed hero, and everyone kind of like, you know, goes into these kind of like these more of the cliche kind of character types in that last act, the damsel in distress, everything like this. So, you know, I think the third act is okay, but it's just a little bit kind of like messy compared to the first two. There are some technical issues with this movie. Obviously, there are some editing issues. The version that I have seen obviously had the extra footage at the beginning, which feels a lot more kind of like gory and schlocky than compared to when you look at the attack scenes, for example, at the beginning. Which it also adds elements that aren't really carried over. So we almost see a kind of a zombie creature in the first sort of like 15 minutes. But that's never referenced again, so there's some kind of continuity issues with this because of that kind of new footage. After that as well, it kind of, you don't really get that kind of level of gore again. And I think the attacks, certainly in the original Italian portions of the movie, aren't quite as kind of spectacular and not particularly kind of all that interesting. It's just like a rake to the face, and that does that kind of a few times. Overall, I've got to be honest with you, I still had a lot of fun with this movie. It ended up being a little bit kind of like jumbled towards the end. But I certainly thought the first two acts, for me at least, built up a good level of anticipation and kind of fun with this kind of mystery about what is kind of going on, and the kind of the fear of the unknown, really, about what you don't quite know what the situation is. And that I actually quite liked. But it's you know, it's not a good movie. It's obviously it's not a great movie. It's kind of cheesy, cliche characters. The effects look a bit hokey by today's standards, but I got to say, I had an element of fun with this one. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to you next time. Bye for now.